Your Partner in Success Radio is a free business podcast with host Denise Griffitts. It's all about great stories, conversation, and context to help you move your business and life forward with actionable tips and advice from her guest experts. To listen and subscribe, just find us on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you consume your podcasts.
Welcome to Your Partner in Success Radio. I am your host, Denise Griffitts, and today we are joined by Josefine Campbell. She is a renowned executive coach and founder of Campbell Company, a leading leadership development consulting firm, and she works with multinational companies like McDonald's and Deloitte. And her approach combines practicality with pragmatism, focusing on developing strengths for positive change. As a four-time Danish jitsu, I think I said that right, champion, she brings a unique perspective on resilience and leadership. Now, Josephine was here about a year ago, I think it was in April of last year, discussing her book, Power Barometer, and that book emphasizes energy management for peak performance, and I have that book. Today, we're exploring her latest book, 12 Tools for Managing a Selfish Leader, which is an interesting topic, and we're going to dive right into it. And that book is also here on my desk. So let's dive into her insights on leadership and personal growth. Good morning, Josephine, and welcome back to Your Partner in Success Radio. And thank you for sending me your new book.
You are so welcome. It's always a pleasure talking with you.
Well, I love your work. And
thank you.
You're not in America, are you? Tell people where you are. I love my international guests.
Yes, I am in Copenhagen, in Scandinavia, the northern part of Europe. But I do travel to US quite a lot, as we have quite a few American clients. But right now I'm home in Copenhagen, next to the Little Mermaid. Actually, my office is like 10 minutes walk from the Little Mermaid, if you heard about her.
No, tell me.
The Little Mermaid. You know it from the fairy tale?
I do.
Okay, so it's a Danish fairy tale, and there's
a
statue. There's a statue of her by the ocean in the city, and it's 10 minutes walk from my office. We have a very beautiful place here.
Well, it sounds like it. Well, Josephine, thank you for coming back. I really appreciate it. I know when we spoke last time, I said, listen, when your new book, because you mentioned your new book, I said, when it's ready, let me know. And you did, and I've got it. So let's tackle it. Your book tackles a critical issue in today's workplace. So can you share with our listeners why effective leadership, we don't have much sometimes, and sometimes we have great leadership and other times, but we don't hear about it, do we? We always hear about the bad ones. So how can selfish leadership undermine organizational success? I don't know why I can't say that word.
Well, selfish leadership makes people hold themselves back. It decreases engagement. It decreases well-being, and it increases turnover rate, employee turnover rate. So quite often you will see around selfish leaders, a lot of people will be quitting, or they get sick, or the engagement numbers are low.
When you say they get sick, is it something that maybe is because of the stress of their environment?
Certainly, it's toxic. And furthermore, what I didn't mention is that selfish leaders, they will be occupied with own agendas rather than what is the better to do for the common good, for the enterprise. So they'll think about their own interest first. So in the long run, they're not going to create a lot of value for the company, though they make it appear like they are indispensable. So often you would think they are the big value creators. They're very efficient. They create a lot of results, but really they're just going for their own KPIs, not for the better interest of the entire company.
Yeah, I've seen that. I guess my question is that the people above them, what should they be looking for when they have this illusion or delusion, what you just mentioned, that they're great creators, they're handling everything, but are they actually looking at how their employees are coping?
That's exactly where they should look. They should look at what do they hear from the organization. If people actually trust them enough to give them real feedback on what they're experiencing with this toxic leader, rather than being blinded by manipulation or smooth talking from the selfish leader. So they should really not make judgment from how a particular leader makes them feel. I think far too many CEOs and other top leaders, they are too controlled by how people make them feel. Oh, I don't feel comfortable with her. Or, oh, I feel very, very comfortable with how he is handling things. They think they're very rational, but really they are not. And even very, very smart people can get manipulated. So they have to look into the engagement data if they do engagement surveys. If they don't do engagement surveys, do engagement surveys. Listen to other leaders or other people in the organization. Listen to the employees in the first level. How do they experience it? And create a culture and a presence where people actually dare to speak the truth to you. Otherwise, you as a leader will be blinded. You will not understand what is going on until it's too late. I see that too often.
Oh, I can imagine. And, you know, we all look at things with our own eyes, with our own biases. So there has to be a way, if you're in leadership, to get past that. And it sounds like, you know, leadership surveys is one way to do it. Are there other ways to say, listen, I really like this guy or this woman, and I am comfortable, but I need to drill down and I need to do it on a regular basis to make sure that all is well with everybody? How do they do that?
I don't think they have time to do it. I think
Uh-oh,
they're
that's not
being,
good.
no, I think they are prioritizing their time so, with so much focus on what is the most important to do right now. So I don't think that's gonna happen just as a kind of a security check. It only happens when there's something wrong. So I think the key is to be extremely humble and ask yourself, what are my blind spots regularly? And create that presence where people actually feel they can approach you and share their perspective. So that means saying thank you for information, even though you don't like getting it, and creating an environment where people don't get judged if they say something that you don't like hearing. It's quite inconvenient sometimes. I spoke to a leader just a few days ago who was devastated because that person just hired someone and found out it was a selfish leader. And this CEO is very knows what is wrong and right. And this CEO didn't want to keep the selfish leader, but it was very inconvenient. You know, it's setting people, it's setting a lot of things back when you lose an important someone in an important role. But it's better to do that than having the wrong person in the role.
Well, what I'm hearing you say is you made a mistake, fix it because the long term is going to be awful.
Yes, that's exactly right.
But it's hard to tell, isn't it? So why did he hire this person, I wonder?
Because the person seemed very likable, had a wonderful resume, passed all the tests, made a great impression. So the CEO was very surprised when she started getting feedback from the organization of how he has been behaving. And apparently he's not smart enough because he started having a bad behavior right away, just when starting in the position. Some people will be smart enough to wait having a bad behavior until they're like 3 or 6 months into the job, because then they're harder to get rid of.
Wow. I, so she had she had it set up where people could go to her, which
Yeah,
is what you were talking about earlier.
exactly. That's how she found out.
So he's busted. She needs to let him
Yep,
go.
exactly. And it's very inconvenient.
I would imagine she has to start all over. But
Yeah.
and I know you've been through these before with people that you're counseling or working with. What is, and I'm just spitballing here because now I'm very curious. What will happen? How long has this person been in the job?
Oh, just a couple of weeks.
Oh gosh, get rid of him now.
Exactly. That's what I said. But
It's
it
not
took
a,
months to find him.
oh, I see. I
Yeah.
see. Well, here's my attitude about things like that. Nature abhors a vacuum. The minute you rid yourself of something that is just not working,
Hmm.
something else better pops up without fail.
Yes. True.
Well, I hope it all works out before she loses really good employees.
Yeah.
I wonder how many resumes are being written right now.
Hmm.
Yeah,
A lot.
I would imagine. Well, my next question is that many of our listeners might be struggling with a selfish leader right now.
Hmm.
So, what advice do you have for someone who's wondering, should I stay in the job, kind of like these people, or should I go?
Yeah. So it really depends on your situation. If you feel vulnerable, then don't stay. If you, like Marie in my book, if you, like her, is in a very good situation where you have a lot of support from your family and friends and colleagues, and you don't have a life which is very, very complicated, and you feel like you have the surplus of energy and time to take care of yourself on top of your job so that you can maintain a reasonable personal energy level while dealing with this, then you can consider staying. So Marie, she has a very supportive husband. She has just one kid. That kid is thriving. It's not a baby. She's not being kept awake at night. She doesn't have a lot of other obligations, but doing her job. And she's already in a good position with a lot of colleagues who trust her and appreciates her. So I do think, staying in a position with a resilient, with a selfish leader, it requires a good starting point where you're quite resilient to start with. And then Marie, she is in this situation where she decides that she doesn't want to leave again because she have experienced previously in a previous job that there was a selfish leader in her way. So she comes to the conclusion that if I have to keep on quitting whenever I bump into a selfish leader, then I won't get anywhere. And she actually likes her job and the company, and she's going somewhere. She doesn't want that selfish leader to be the roadblock that prevents her from reaching the goals that she wants to reach. So that's why she makes that decision. And I actually think the reason why I wrote the book is also I see there's some kind of truth to this, because when I speak to people who are vice presidents or above, practically all of them have had an experience like Marie's or something like it. So if you keep on quitting your job when you bump into it, it might be a question of the circumstances of where you end up, and less a question about what you decide to do. And Marie, she wants to be in the hands of her own will, her own free will.
Well, that
So,
makes sense. And I've got sticky notes all over your book. I always do.
mhm,
But you mentioned here you use up much more energy whether you are either narrow or fragile
mhm.
when you're working. So you need to find your own zone. Let's talk about that. I'm on page 34.
Okay. So I've created a matrix that is the structure for my first book, Power Barometer, that we spoke about last time I was visiting you. And that matrix has a red zone and a green zone. In the upper left corner, you have narrow. You're in the red zone. In the lower left corner, you have fragile, and you're still in the red zone. On the other side, you have the green zone. In the upper corner, you have agile, and below, you have mellow. So the two axes in the matrix is personal energy. So when you're high on energy, you can be either narrow. It's a state of kind of focus, but it's the kind of focus where you are so occupied with your own objectives and goals and you don't hear what happens around you. Or you can be mentally agile if you're in the green zone. When you are mentally ready, you are your best self. You can see things from different perspectives. You actually have the cognitive ability to be creative, have empathy, shift your mind, super flexible. And of course, some people are better at being analytical, creative, flexible, and so on than others. But what happens is if you slide into the red zone, if you get mentally hijacked, you lose that capability, even though it's a part of your self-image. You become stuck in your mind and you lose your ability to shift perspectives, to think analytically and see things from different perspectives, and even to have some empathy and self-awareness.
See, I'm glad you're mentioning empathy because I think we spoke of that before, but keep going and then I'll come back to it.
Yeah. So you become an automated self when you're hijacked. You're not really free. You are run by logics or not even logics, but like autopilots, mental autopilots that you have created in your past life. So when you get under pressure, that's the behavior you have because sometime back in your past, you succeeded by having that behavior. It could be that you're really pushing through, or it could be that you're overly critical, or it could be that you like judging other people or judging yourself and pushing yourself harder, or you're jumping into a martyr role and saying, okay, nobody else is going to do it, I will do it. And then you run on this automated behavior where you don't reflect as much and you don't check in either with yourself or others. I'm sure everybody who have a little bit of self-awareness can think of a situation where they have been doing that. And very often when we work with groups of leaders from corporate companies, a lot of them are nodding when we talk about the narrow state of mind. And they're quite willing to admit that they spend a lot of time working in the narrow state of mind because they're under so much pressure all the time. There's a lot of unpredictability and uncertainty and a lot of changes all the time. And these are things, or they feel insecure, or there are conflicts, or they're being late for something. All these are things that can potentially make people slide into the red zone. People are less reluctant or are less willing to admit when they're fragile. But the sad truth is that a lot of people are working and living in the fragile box, day in and day out, for years. And at the end, they'll get a depression. We see that a lot.
Yeah, we do. And I'm writing down fragile and narrow. Listen, I am a high-functioning introvert, but I'm also an A-type personality, and I want things done my way. I had to really, really work on myself, particularly with my team when I first started my company, because I just wanted things done my way. And eventually it goes back to empathy and listening without really knowing what you're hearing. And I realized that over time, and it didn't take very long, I'll be honest with you, my team, who are all remote, they were doing what I wanted them to do, but it was barely, just barely. And I had to stop and think, I think I'm losing them. I'm going to lose them. And I, called a meeting. We got on Zoom and called a meeting. And I said, listen, there is nothing that I ask any one of you experts to do that I don't know how to do myself, but I recognize that you are experts, that you do keep up with your certifications, that you know far more than I do at this point. I'm getting out of your way. Because what they were doing, honestly, and I came to understand, was just malicious compliance. They would do what I asked for, but not a thing more. And everything changed after I got out of my own way.
Mm.
But I got out of my own way because I panicked. It's like I don't want to lose them. And I
Yeah.
didn't. Most of them are still with me. But I was just about to completely destroy a team just by being a winch, by, hey, do what you're told, nobody gets hurt. That doesn't work.
Nope, it doesn't.
It
And there
really
must have been
doesn't.
something that made you behave like that, something that pushed you. What were you worried about, or were you scared of something, or?
I just noticed that they weren't as friendly. There
Mm-hmm.
was no back and forth in the conversations. They were not making any suggestions. And I realized that I was barking orders, so to speak,
Yeah.
and just expecting it to be done my way, exactly as I laid it out. When I tell you, and I can do anything I ask them to do, but I am not an expert at any one of those things. They are.
Mm-hmm.
So why not get out of their way?
Yeah, there must have been like a very good moment that made you reflect when
There
you were
was.
actually in the green zone.
Yeah, there was. And I couldn't tell you right now what it was, but I just remember, well, I tend to pay attention to my intuition, and I realized that
Mm.
I was clutching my stomach a lot. Whenever I would get an email or a message from somebody, and I would clutch my stomach because I knew intuitively there was something wrong, and that something wrong was clearly me.
Mm-hmm.
So I took care of it. But boy, it was embarrassing. I had to get off of my high chair, my big, you know, throne chair, and humble myself. Best thing I ever did.
Yes, and it sounds like the opposite of selfish leadership.
Oh, good.
It does, because that's, taking responsibility for your own behavior, being humble, being willing to put yourself in the shoes of others, willing to admit mistakes. It's the opposite of a selfish leader. We are all prone to have an undesired behavior once in a while, and that's excusable. But it takes that you actually make an excuse for it to be excusable.
Well, and you have to understand, or at least start paying attention to something that might be in the back of your head. It may be, in my case, it's always in my stomach. If I'm clutching my stomach, there's something wrong somewhere. It's not physical,
Yeah,
it's my intuition going, hey, knock, knock. But
yeah,
I kept noticing, probably in the back of my mind, that they were not being very friendly. They were,
yeah.
very, here you go, have a nice day, bye. And it was like that changed. It's changed slowly, but it changed. And I
Hmm.
had to do something about it.
Yeah. You were paying attention. Good thing that you reacted to it.
Oh, I know. Can you imagine? And kind of goes back to what you were talking about with this gal who needs to fire her new employee.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to train new people. I mean, these guys did great and do great work,
Hmm.
but I was just the boss.
Yeah.
And the boss is not always the best person to take advice from.
Nope, not always.
I know, I know. So in your book, you provide 12 tools for managing selfish leadership. And if you can't self-manage it, read this book. So could you highlight a few of the most powerful tools that can empower people to handle those difficult dynamics at work?
Yes, certainly. I think the awareness matrix that we just talked about, the one that has narrow, fragile, agile, and mellow inside the matrix, it's a very powerful framework that enables people to navigate in what is really happening within themselves and in other people in difficult situations. So it's a roadmap that you just got to get to know. And that's why I put it on my website, where you can find it in the freebie section, because I really want it to be available for anyone who wants to use it. And I know that there are other people who work with leadership development, who are facilitating processes and teaching leaders, and who have adapted the awareness matrix and are using it when they train other leaders. And I feel very proud of that, because they're smart people who took it up. So that's the first one I'm gonna highlight. It's also the matrix that the first book is built on, and it appears again in the second book, 12 Tools for Managing a Selfish Leader. So that's one tool. Which of the tools did you like most, Denise? Because I think all 12 tools are valid, so it's difficult for me to pick one. It depends on the situation, I would say.
Well, you just covered awareness. I have to be aware because I'm the only person who's in charge, really.
Yeah.
At least I like to think I am, but I'm actually not. I depend very heavily on other people. I depend on input from coaches, mentors, my team. So me thinking that I'm the boss, God darn it, is just silly. And I think that's if people who are listening to me go, oh, she's speaking my language, I do that or I did that. Pay attention to awareness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, keep going because there's 12 tools. Which do you think we've only got about 20 more minutes.
Yeah.
What do you think our audience needs to hear first or most?
Well, I just think I was just dwelling with your point on the awareness, because I do agree with you. It's so essential, the awareness. But if I can elaborate a little bit on that, I do think we have momentarily absolute freedom if we cultivate our mind and if we are very intentional with the choices we make in life. So if you're in the green zone, you have the opportunity to make deliberate choices of how to design your life. And of course, other things can happen. Life can happen. There are things you don't control. But at least you have some influence on how your life will be shaped. And that brings me to another tool, the values lighthouse, which is a tool where you make up your mind on what are your key values. Mauritia does that quite early on in the process, because she needs to turn inwards when things outwards is so unpredictable and uncontrollable and abusive sometimes. Where she can turn to is her inner strength. And a gateway to that is knowing your top 2 or 3 values. And that's what the lighthouse is about. And I think it's key for almost anybody today, where there's so much unpredictability in the world and so much instability, that you need to find that stability within yourself. And knowing your top 2 or 3 values can give you a North Star. So when you don't know whether to go right or left, what is wrong or right, at least you can look at your lighthouse of values and see whether your actions or choices are aligned with those values that you find most important. And at the end of the day, even though you're going to go through stormy weathers, you can't be a really bad destination if that destination is in the direction of your top values.
And that makes perfect sense. I wrote down while you were talking, introverts and extroverts. Look, I am an introvert. People think, oh, you're not. You sound so friendly. I am. And I
Yeah.
don't have any filters. I'm not shy, but I need to be alone 98.9% of the time. I've
Mm.
always been this way. It's gotten worse as I've gotten older, and I'm perfectly happy in it. I don't see any reason to change. This is where I live. But how are you finding that within these matrices, I guess, I'm not sure that's the right word, introverts and extroverts, because we operate very differently?
Yeah. Well, Marie, she's also an introvert. And Martin, her selfish boss, he's an extrovert. So somehow he has an upper hand in the sense that most business environments are designed for extroverts. Very often in a meeting, it's expected that you can listen to some information, make an opinion, and make a decision right away. And it's actually just one personality profile who's capable of doing that. It's not everybody. You can be an excellent leader and have an excellent judgment, but need to be able to think about it a little while before you make a decision or before you speak up. It doesn't mean you're a bad leader. It just means that the environment is not very inclusive. It's very one-sided. But what is interesting about this whole introvert extrovert discussion, I hear what you're saying, and I hear that you have a big need or a need to spend at least 98% of your time alone. But there are people within the field who are questioning whether you can actually differentiate between introvert or extrovert. Whether
Really?
it's, yeah, whether it's something we become for some reasons. There are some
Oh,
people who
I
don't
was born
believe we're
this
born
way.
introvert.
I
Yeah,
was literally born this way. I knew from the time I was very young that I needed to be alone. And I was reading at 3.
yeah.
I was surrounded by books, and I would pick up books that I shouldn't have been touching, like Guy de
Mm.
Maupassant and, things like that. But I learned to read, write, and mostly articulate what I was thinking through reading. But my siblings, all extroverts, very loud. TV was always on, and I was in agony. I was in agony.
Mm.
I was constantly grabbing whatever book was to hand and going to the backyard and making a fort and threatening anybody that came within 4 feet of me all my life.
To
So,
me, it's
so
it
I think
sounds.
I was born that way. I really was.
I believe you. I believe you. But I would also be curious about your IQ. It sounds like you were a gifted child. It sounds like the behavior of a lot of
Yeah,
gifted children. Hmm?
yeah, I have a high IQ.
Yeah.
I can't
And when
even be
you,
humble about it. It is what it is.
yeah. So I could figure that out. And a lot of people with high IQ have a harder time finding people in this world that they could really connect with. Because one thing is, no matter, even if you're average, it's not like you connect with everybody who is also average. There's some people you connect with and some people you don't connect with. And then when you have a high IQ, it's harder because there are less people like yourself. And if there's more than 10 IQ points between you, it's hard to really resonate with each other, to create resonance where this feeling where you're talking with someone and it's a true exchange where you feel like I get you and you feel like you get me, and there's a pure exchange where both party feels that the other person is mirroring them. And you can even measure that on the mirror neurons when that happens. It's pretty fascinating. And of course, if you are in the top 2%, there are very few people with whom that's going to happen because the way that your brain operates and the pace your brain operates with is just very different. So you could feel like you're on
Yeah,
another planet and it's difficult for you to connect with other people. And then you
sometimes. And
withdraw. Yeah.
well, yeah, I beat feet. I gotta go now. I can't stick around. But you just explained, I had somebody on LinkedIn say, Denise, I've been listening to your podcast for a long time. This thing's 17 years old. I've been doing it for a long time, and I get to meet people like you from all over the world. And we're talking high IQ people. We're talking about very passionate people who are, making strides in their world. And he said, "Why do you keep doing what you're doing?" And I didn't have an answer. You just explained it for me.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you. I
You're
mean, I didn't
welcome.
have an answer. I just do it because I love it, which is an
Yeah.
inadequate answer. It's not a great response.
Well, I think it's a valid answer. Well, we only certain of that we have this life, and if we, why not spend it doing something we love and enjoy life? And if it's talking to people that you find interesting, and it's a good way of spending your life. I actually told my friend yesterday as well that I, in the beginning, I did these podcast interviews to promote my book, but then I found out that I really enjoy having these conversations with brilliant people all over the world who have a depth and a pure genuine interest in the subjects we're talking about, and it's so satisfying to have these conversations that now I do it because I enjoy it.
Exactly. It's not likely that you're going to meet somebody that you can just instantly connect with at some kind of level in your local Walmart. It's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
I love that. I'm going to, now I have an answer for him. I'm going to respond today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I just went, and I just drew a blank. Because I
Yeah.
get to meet people from all over the world. It's not adequate, but what you just explained is perfect.
Yeah.
So before we get sidetracked, let's dive into some practical strategies. What are your top recommendations for navigating the challenges of working under a selfish leader or a boss? Somebody
Yeah.
like I used to be. I don't know how they stood me for as long as they did.
Well, I don't think you fit into the category. I'm sorry, Denise. You're
Are you
not within the
sure?
category of a selfish leader. Yes, I
I
am
was for
sure.
a while. I was. I mean, even once I figured out what I was doing, I, I swear to God, I did this. I raised my left hand up, I took my right hand, and I smacked my own hand.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
was, I
but
had to
you
do
do have
something physical.
consciousness. You
Yeah, I
have
do.
awareness, you have consciousness. You do have the ability to feel remorse. So in the way I define selfish leadership, you don't match the category. I'm sorry. Leadership is such a tricky thing. And you don't match the description of being a selfish leader. Really, you don't. The way I heard you talk about your story, it's more like being unaware, being in what I call the red zone. You were probably narrow or maybe even fragile and just pushing to get things done in a not so effective way, not good leadership. But that doesn't mean you're a selfish leader. The way I use the term selfish leader is not just a momentary selfish behavior. It's when a leader doesn't take responsibility but point fingers at others. It's when a leader do not have the ability to feel remorse and do not feel empathy. So, they can have feelings on their own behalf, but they don't really care about the pain that other people will feel. And when you share your story, I hear that you do care, that you do take responsibility, and that you do change your behavior.
I'm so glad to hear you say that because listen, when we're kids, I am firmly convinced that up until about 17 years old, all humans are sociopaths. They can't help it. It's just who we are. And then we start growing and hopefully evolving. And things that really bother me, I'll be honest with you, is people who don't seem to have any empathy. And I don't know about you, but I can just about smell them. I can
Mm-hmm.
tell almost instantly that we're not going to get along well because I'm not going to tolerate them very well.
Mm. Yeah, you're probably a very value driven person.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But, going back to what you were talking about empathy, I guess, and I'm thinking about leadership, I'm thinking about politics. I mean, we seem to be surrounded these days. It's just an observation. I have no data to back it up. But it seems to me right now that empathy and EQ are in short supply. How does that happen?
Well, if we talk about politics or even how things work at the workplace, so much is run through digital media,
Mm,
social media, but
I knew you
also,
were going to go there. Okay, keep going.
yeah, yeah. So it's harder to transmit and communicate and empathy. You can, but you cannot be too many people on the call if you are to feel each other. And you have to be able to see each other's faces, and all of you have to be very aware of how to create resonance in a digital space. It's much harder than being in the same room. And when democracy, or some kind of remnants of democracy, is being exercised through screens, so much can go wrong. So much can go wrong.
It really
And
can. I'm sorry, keep on going. I had a thought, but you
no,
keep
come,
yours,
come
you
on.
go with yours, and
No,
then
no, it's
I'll.
fine.
Well, it really can be. Listen, I rarely meet up with people live because, I'm a highly committed introvert. I'm very rarely around other people, but I spend a lot of time on screens. But like you just said, I'm very, very careful to limit it to no more than two other people because I
Yeah.
need it there on camera. I'm never on camera, but I can see what they're thinking, doing. I can see facial expressions. Just as an
Mm-hmm.
example, I've been
Mm-hmm.
mentoring people to do their own podcast, which is a huge passion of mine. And I was watching one of my clients, and I just actually happened to look up at the screen, and we were just about ready to launch. And she was very concerned that, once we were done, that I would disappear out of her life. And I made some snark is my second language, to be honest. And I said some kind of thing. I said, listen, you're not getting rid of me. I'm not asking for a divorce. And she took it well. I mean, she took it the way I meant it.
Mm,
I was being, smart aleck. And I watched her drop her head in her hands and the relief, her shoulders, went, they had been up towards her ears. She was just so worried that she was going to be left on her own. I would never do that.
mm, mm,
And I remember watching that and going, I had no idea that this
mm,
was so impactful for her. It was a lesson for
mm,
me. So I get what
mm.
you're saying.
Yeah, yeah. It requires much more from us, much more attention, awareness, and deliberate attention.
Exactly. And you're right. It is so difficult when people are on screens.
Hmm.
So I rely on voice because everything I do is audio. But
Yeah,
when I'm watching my clients, I learned from that moment to not pay attention to something that's on my desk or not get distracted. I'm watching because
yeah,
those, what do they call those? Those micro expressions or,
yeah,
quick,
exactly.
pay attention. And you can't do that
Yeah,
with a whole, 20 people on a Zoom call. You just
you
can't.
can't. And you
No,
certainly can't do it multitasking or having your mind somewhere else. So before
exactly.
I have sessions with my clients, I will meditate to make sure I'm fully present with them, that I'm not thinking about my groceries or my kids or what happened in the last session. I will also put 30 minutes between sessions to let go of the last session and freshen my mind. And so I'm very disciplined around that. But like in most people's work life where they have back to back meetings, they hardly let go of one meeting before they're into the other. And a lot of people are not aware of this either. So they'll be thinking about something else, or what happened in the last meeting will still be processed while they're in the other meeting, and they didn't have time to prepare, and all this deliberate being and awareness just doesn't happen so much. And then it's very, very difficult to connect and to understand each other, to create the resonance, and especially if you're on a screen, it's harder. It's just harder.
It is. And doing what I'm doing, I'm learning so much about how I operate, which, we like to think we're on top of it. We've got it. We can just, keep on doing what we're doing, we can't. We need to pay attention. And I hate this. It's a COVID word and I hate it, but we need to
Mhm.
pivot as needed. We need to back up and say, okay, put that in my list of things to pay attention to.
Yeah. So you have to be very deliberate, and then you can create resonance on a screen. You do it in your work. I do it all the time. I have at least half of my coaching sessions are on Teams because I work with people all over the globe. And there's lots of resonance in those sessions. We're just two people, and sometimes we're three people. But I mentally prepare and I make sure we have the right conditions, and I have a high level of awareness and deliberate attention, but you have to be that disciplined for it to happen. And
And
most people are not.
awareness, no, they're not. I mean, I'm guilty of it every once in a while myself, probably more often than I notice. But the most important word you just said there, Josephine, is awareness.
Yes, awareness.
Yeah,
And throughout this conversation, I hope that somehow it has the awareness of some of the listeners have grown a little bit. I hope some of what we talked about did resonate with some of the listeners, that they will take something with them that will expand or grow the awareness of that person.
absolutely. I wanted to go back to the very top of the show, and I know we're about to run out of time in just a little bit. So, as a four-time Danish jiu-jitsu champion, you bring an absolutely unique perspective on resilience. I'm sorry, I don't know who that is, and I can't slam the phone down. Um, how does your martial arts background inform your approach to handling challenging leadership? I cannot say that. Um, Leadership situations. Sorry
Yeah,
about that. Normally I unplug the
all good.
phone. I didn't do it this time. I apologize.
I didn't hear anything. There was no disruption on my end. So it's all good. So it's a very good question because Japanese or East Asian martial art is very much about awareness, being fully present and aware of what happens inside you and around you, and thereby master a challenging situation because you are capable of being mentally agile, of being agile and bringing about the best reaction or response to the situation you're in.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, it really does. And I know that that's something that's it's very much a part of your life and your
Mm-hmm.
health and your mindfulness. I mean, you pay a lot of attention to all points of your life, don't you? And
I
I think
do.
that's something we all need desperately to pay attention to and learn, whether it's meditation, whether it's, for me yesterday, I was outside cutting up trees. I needed a break. Whatever it is, you need to pay attention to it and then work with it. And I think when you're
Yes.
going, like you say, people are going from meeting to meeting to meeting. I get zoomed out very quickly. I think there's actually a
Mm-hmm.
term for that, the Zoom infection. I don't know what it is, but I can only do just so many a day. And like you, I have to have 30-minute breaks. My
Yeah.
brain can't take it. My patients can't take it.
But we also have evidence that your biology as a human being can't take it. There are
Right.
plenties of studies showing how the brain gets fried, and there are plenties of studies showing how the natural personal energy level of a human being goes up and down throughout a day, no matter what you do, and that you need some downtime.
Absolutely. Listen, I know we're running out of time and you've got to go to your next event. Looking ahead very quickly, how do you see the landscape of leadership evolving? And what role do you think in individual empowerment, which we've been talking a lot about, what will that play in shaping future workplace cultures?
Yeah. So, one thing is the way it's evolving and where it's going out in the world. And I do see that companies invest more and more in leadership development. This is something that we know works and that is worthwhile spending time and money on. But they do it in a number of different ways. And one thing I think makes a lot of sense in this world is moving away from what I would call technical leadership, or instrumental leadership, where it's just something you do and not something that you are.
Oh, that makes sense. Well, listen, Josefine, thank you so much for joining us here today. I love that you've been here for a second time, and you are welcome to come back anytime. But before we wrap up, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience, and where can they connect with you, and how can they find both of your books?
Yeah, so if you search for the book titles, Power Barometer, Manage Personal Energy for Business Success, or 12 Tools for Managing a Selfish Leader, you will find the books on Amazon or anywhere else where you get your books. And if you go to my website, josephinecampbell.com, Josephine is spelled with an F, you can subscribe from a newsletter. You can book a free 20 minutes session if you're interested in coaching or some kind of leadership development, where we can explore your situation and your leadership path. And there is a freebie section as well, where you can get free access to some of the tools that we talked about today, the awareness matrix, the values lighthouse, and much more.
Excellent. Go ahead.
And if you're a LinkedIn user, please connect with me. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I'll post something inspirational at least a couple of times a week. And I love to engage with people there because I really care and I have a true interest in you.
I know you do. And thank you. Well, listen, to our audience, thank you so much for joining us today on your Partner in Success Radio as we explore Josefine Campbell's book, 12 Tools to Managing a Selfish Leader. We discuss the importance of effective leadership strategies for navigating challenging work dynamics and tools to empower individuals in managing difficult leaders. So whether you're deciding to stay or leave a job, remember that you have the power to transform your work environment. Take the first step by applying her insights. And for more expert advice and insights from my guests, please subscribe to the podcast and join us next time on your Partner in Success Radio for more inspiring conversations that will help you achieve success in your career. Josefine, thank you so much.
You are so welcome, and it's been a pleasure talking to you again, as always.
Same to you. Let's definitely stay in touch.
Get your voice heard. If you would like to launch your own far-reaching podcast, contact Denise Griffitts at yourofficeontheweb.com and go to the podcast tab.